All right, we're live. What's up, everyone? How's it going? Hey, Megan. Hey, Brian.
Hello.
Hey, how are you guys?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Really fine. The last time we were together
Oh,
was a
hope
week
lived.
ago. 1 week
Hmm.
ago. Feels like 6 lifetimes, but it's only been 1 week. Brian, go ahead. I know you want
I
to
was
say
just going to say, at least we got great fish tours to
something.
discuss and argue about and celebrate and wonder if they're really important questions. Is this fish tour overrated, underrated, or properly rated? That's what we're here for. That's
Yeah,
it right
The
there.
important stuff.
I haven't been on to the Twitter platform in a week, and I wanted to go and tell our followers that we were doing this broadcast, but now I don't know if I can. So hopefully you guys know how to find us.
Yeah.
I put some
Um,
information on said platform for
Good.
people.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Hmm.
Also,
Yeah.
I think we're battling right now against the Ryan Storm brigade because they're doing a live thing right now also. And they might have all of our viewers. I don't know.
They probably do. He
Yeah, they
says
Probably
probably
do.
more.
do.
He has more hot takes than we do. Plus, like, have you ever looked at the guys in Goose? Like, they're just gorgeous, and I think people just like hearing about gorgeous guys.
Yeah,
And they
well,
played
that's why.
acoustic last night, and Trevor wore a hat, and hats are awesome. Yeah, they looked amazing last night. Good show.
Well, that's why we don't have people watching us because, you know, that's why. That's all why. Okay, so we got a lot of takes though, at least on this tour.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
all right. First of all, we're at number 5. This is the should we let's just get into it because we've had enough of the preamble. We've had enough preamble. It's been almost 2 minutes. We're way behind schedule. Right, Brian?
Get get into it. Come on. There's a lot to say.
We're
Let's
talking about the
go.
number 5 tour. This is August. Well, I just call it August 93, but it's actually technically summer 93, right?
I got a point about that as well. I think that's an
Okay.
immediate hot take that deserves hotter taking.
Okay. This was the number 12 ranked tour from fans, and we ranked it number 5. And now we're gonna have to defend why we did that. And there's someone's going to. I'm not sure who, but I assume someone will. But what's going on here? Why are we in summer 93 at number 5? Let's just answer that question.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that you call it August 93 by default
Hmm.
because, and I think as you go through this tour, as we all have, Meg and I were talking about this before we went live, it's really a 3 week stretch. Like when I went through and put together my list of jams that you have to hear to understand this tour, I have 3 pre 8-2, and then I have 3 post 820. And that's not to say that there's not great moments pre and post, and there's not fun stuff. Like they released their Great Wood show, which was their biggest show to date at the time, and that is a really cool, fun show with like a lot of like cool little nuggets. But the meat of this tour is 3 weeks where the band learns how to be in all caps fish. This is hay hole jamming where you can see the stitching. You can it almost sounds like band practice. We talked about this a bit with Summer 95, but this is obviously pre that. This is before they could ever have envisioned playing a 40-minute long jam, let alone 50. But this is a band that is either intentionally or just throughout the larger evolution since 1989 has figured out a formula. They've tightened everything up. Their shows feature all types of music, lots of humor, and some experimentation here and there. And in this tour, the experimentation takes over and now shows have the structure that we're used to. They're going to break that down 8-9 months later, but this is the tour where they figure out if we just follow our muse in the moment and we just go, who cares if we're going to go from Bathtub Gin and Namake Supa into a bluegrass song, into a song about stepping in dog shit. Like, who cares? That doesn't make sense. That's not written in the set list. Nobody's expecting that flow, but that is the special quality that makes Phish. And so, in closing to the opening, I will just say before I turn the pages to you all, this may be hyperbolic. I don't care. Come at me. You can't find me online. Come find me at my house like they used to do in real authoritarian empires. Simply put, this might be the most important Phish tour ever played.
Wow. Wow.
I mean, I think in the context of, I can't really refute what you're saying, like from a factual perspective, but the fact that we have Spring 94 as our number 22 ranked tour, and then we had Summer 94 as our number 9 tour, and then we have Summer 93 as our number 5 tour. So the groundwork that this tour laid is more important than what they laid the groundwork for, or what it laid the groundwork for, which I think is interesting. I think it's interesting. I want to say that I find it interesting. I think this tour is entirely symbolic. I think it's a symbolic tour. I think it's like the king, in Denmark or whatever. Like, it's just like, it doesn't really mean anything. Doesn't really do anything. I don't go back to these shows for the jams. I appreciate what it represents in terms of all the things that you were just describing, but there's no way it's a top 5 tour musically. That's my take.
Megan, I don't want to elbow you out here. I just feel like
Go
I
ahead.
have to respond to this.
I'm letting you respond. I want you to.
Completely countered. So I think with Spring and Summer 94, just to get those out of the way, I would say those are more about audience growth and audience build. And I think while there may be better moments musically within that, I don't think the entirety of those two tours match up with the breakthrough that they had here. I don't think we're going to hear a breakthrough like this until Fall 94, which, spoiler, I just finished last night, and holy shit, I have so many hot takes about that because holy shit. But I think, and this is, we'll get into this when we do a full review of this series when it's all out. I think that the quibble of this versus, say, Summer 95, I think that musically is a stronger tour. But I do think when you think about who the band is going to become, what is going to define their evolution, their growth, their change, their inspiration, these 3 weeks from August 2nd to August 20th, you hear it all happening in real time. And while you're right, it may not be the quote unquote best music Phish has ever made, these are the biggest risks that they had taken to this point in time, which directly points to the larger successes. So, Meg, I'm throwing it over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about this because I think one reason, RJ, maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you feel that way, and why maybe fans did as well, is that the song selection is super repetitive. The structure of these shows, exactly the same every night. I think 2001 opens like 95% of the second sets. It's just like the same, a lot of the same. Everything's played super tight. There's so much energy. There's so much playfulness. They have that, still the new Phish vibe. But this is the first tour for me that Type 2 becomes like the go-to. This is like consistent Type 2 jamming in this month of August in every show. Like every single show in this month of August has like really tight, really well played songs, and then a couple songs that get fucking weird. Just like go out there and build that tension and release, and build it in many different ways, which I'm excited to talk about when we talk about the sound. But if you think about the band at this point, this is their 6th year of playing over 100 shows in a row every year. Not in a row, but like in a year. So they're bringing this like peak musicianship to this willingness to explore. And they're no longer relying on teases and segues to create interesting improv. Like some of their other improv, like in like Spring of 92, it's going into other songs and then coming out, going into other songs, coming out. This is, to me, the first time that they're kind of like launching into the unknown together consistently and not just trying to play teases and other songs within it. And I also think it's a moment where their gear meets up with their ability. Like we've got the piano coming in, we've got electronic keyboards introduced, their improved conditions on tour. They sound, I don't know enough about like what was going on with Trey and Mike's gear and Fishman's gear, but everything sounds leveled up. And you hear them in spring of 92, they're playing with a lot of these ideas, especially when they're out west, but their gear doesn't sound good enough to pull it off. And here I can hear them pulling off these ideas with their improved gear. And to me, it's just the most thrilling month, because even though listening to this music, it's challenging, a lot of it's really intense to listen to. I think especially this week, like it's a really intense week to listen to, very agitated jamming all week, but I did it. I did it for you guys. So it's not something that I return back to, and not something that's like great to listen to at like 8 to 10 p.m. when I listen every night and read, but I think it's really important to the evolution of the band. I agree.
I think we're all in agreement on that. It's an important symbolic tour. I appreciate that. And that's kind of a wrap. Right? Brian?
I like
Just-
I like how you agree with us and then you immediately throw in symbolic, because of course it's symbolic. But let's be real here.
I agree with what you're saying musically. I mean, I do think it's a turning point though too, in terms of
Yes.
which we all agree with.
It's like the first probably big turn. Like it's the beginning of the real peak.
Well,
I
and
mean-
you think about it, we've included spring 92, spring 93, and I think we included those tours for many of the same reasons we're including this, but I don't think any of us would disagree that this is the more aggressive, like upward turn that we've heard them do. Like we've heard them level up in certain ways. And there's, to your point about spring 92 and spring 93, there are jams, but a lot of them include teases or segue into another song. I think you made just like a brilliant point that like this is when the jamming becomes its own thing. And now these songs are jam vehicles. They're not just like a springboard into some moderate insanity for 15 minutes or so.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go back to the stage setting here. Megan, what do we got? What do we need to know about 1993 Fish?
Yeah, let's set the stage. Rift was released in February. That's really important. We talked about Page's improved gear. The grand piano came out on tour in February. This winter/spring tour they did in February, March, April, and some of May was absolutely enormous. They basically toured for over 3 months straight. It was crazy, playing clubs, colleges, and theaters. And then they embark on this huge summer tour up and down the East Coast through the Midwest and then the West Coast. 33 shows, 139 jam chart entries, so 4.2 jams per show. One thing that is kind of interesting and cool is that these jams are pretty short. Like the longest ones are like 18, 19 minutes, which did make listening a little bit easier, but there's no like enormous jumps into like the deep end, and which is kind of exciting. Sometimes I would turn on and I'd be like, okay, how many of these jams from this show do I need to listen to? Okay, well, good. There's 3 of them. They're only like 15 minutes each, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. Well, let's just get what about the sound, Megan?
The sound.
Yeah. Like, what do you hear?
Well,
I mean, you
there's-
mentioned the equipment, which I agree with. Like Trey, like
Yeah.
in 92, Page like is playing like a little kid's piano basically until
Linus's
this
piano.
year.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things I think about with the sound. One is in terms of like the shows. And like I said earlier, the set list construction is really similar, but they're not afraid to jam anywhere. Like they'll jam the opener, they'll jam in the middle of the first set, they'll jam the end of the first set, they'll jam anywhere in the second set. And then there's consistent jams in certain songs like Reba, Stash, Split Up in a Mount, Mike's, Antelope Yam. Those are kind of always jammed. But I think the sound is really interesting because it's super playful and exuberant and joyful. You think about like the Chalk Dust and the Who Knows from Toronto. There's just this looseness to it that feels really kind of free and fun. Then there's also like the speed and precision and how tight and crisp they are, especially when they're not jamming. But even when they are jamming too, the ability to kind of turn on a dime and go anywhere. And the other thing that I love is that they have this extra flourish. They're so muscular that they can kind of play on top of and ahead of this like really complicated music. So they'll do like extra drum kicks or fills on the ending of mics, or like they'll switch up the melody on the intro to Possum. And they're just doing a lot of things like just kind of like add extra kind of mustard to everything. But the biggest kind of sound element, I think, is the tension and release that they like work so much into this tour. The weaving melodically, repetitive riffs, tempo shifts. And what I noticed about the tempo shifts, which I hadn't really noticed before, is that they use it to build tension in different ways. So one way is they get the audience to start trying to listen for melody. So they start these like dissonant, chaotic noise jams. And since this is not the era of like 45-minute jams, everybody knows they're going to end. And so people are listening and anticipating the melody clicking back in. And that builds tension with the audience. And also they'll slow down their tempo or speed it up, so that, like, for instance, if you look at like the intro to Wilson from Vancouver at 8:24, it makes the listener wait for the tempo to pick back up, which builds tension. And they can only do that when the audience really knows their music, which is something that they really worked on in the early 90s. So I think it's really cool because they've built this fan base that knows their music so well that they can build tension just by playing things slower than expected or faster than expected, because you're waiting for it to get back into tempo, which I think is really cool and a different way to engage the audience. And also I was thinking, to me, it always just meant like, when I think of tension and release, I just think of like a build, a build, a build, a release, but it's not really like that. They have a lot of ways of building tension and release differently.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty spot on. I mean, I think the speed, the tempo, the dynamic, the way that they're messing with the audience is almost like it's almost like music class for their audience, and they
Yeah.
clearly tapped into something that their audience really enjoys, which is this idea of like what can happen in music when it's unleashed. And they are
Mhm.
so tight now. I mean, again, we talked about this in season 1 of Undermine. Like, they were a pretty loose, jammy band that was interested in prog rock in the 80s, and then everything kind of flips in 89 when they suddenly start going out on these 3 to 4 month tours, wrapping around the country multiple times, playing colleges, and they get a formula down for what a show should be. And
Mhm.
89, 90, 91, there's not a ton of jam charts, no matter how many debuts they want to stuff on there and call them jams. But like, by 93 here, and by August specifically, they're so good at that it's almost this what's next. And I kept thinking, these quick jumps, these new ideas, any new idea that's unleashed to the audience and to the listeners can suddenly lead to this whole new segment of jamming. And this is a very new thing for Phish. And this is something that 14, 15 months later is going to be expanded upon when they start to play 30, 40-minute long jams, and they start to really, like, they know that if someone plays a new line, it can go for another 5-10 minutes. Here, as you said, Meg, it's condensed. It's 15, 18, 19-minute long jams. They also don't necessarily have, and I wonder, RJ, if this is something that is part of your rationale for how you feel about this tour. They don't have the like musical weight or seriousness that we're going to get in
Yeah.
94, 95, 97, where like the music really feels like you can put on some of those jams and it just feels like you went on a journey with the band, and there's like real meat on the bone here. There's not as much here. This is more
Mhm.
showy, but this is a showy band that is so good that they want to show you all their tricks, but they're starting to learn, like you said, Meg, how do we mess with this audience? How do we have some patience so that we can work in a way that creates just a completely unique experience for all attendees?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I first of all, I think this tour is in the middle, basically in between like 3 different phases of Phish. It's kind of like in the middle. It's at the end of the just every like if you listen to any song from 92 and even into early 93, although maybe the real turning point is the Newport 93 show in the spring, which many people point to that Split Up in a Melt as like a point where they were able to kind of like look beyond the structure of what they were doing for the first time
Totally.
in front of the audience.
Mhm.
But and they've done it in the past, but that was kind of like a bit of a turning point. But you listen to any stash from like 92, 93, it's just it's just fast and really good and really like precise, right? And then you have this building of tension like you were talking about, Meg, which they really like kind of mastered on this tour, but then toward the end of the tour they start to enter this other phase of which I would consider like actual exploration for the first time, which is pretty amazing. But I view it more as like a meditation, like akin to a meditation practice where like you get to you perfect it so that you can move beyond it. So like they got
Mhm.
to the point where like everything was
Totally.
so they got to the point where like they were doing everything that they had known how to do, and I think at that point is when they start to think about like what is the other what's beyond this, you know. But you can't get there until you're like until you're satisfied with where you are at your current phase. Like if you meditate enough, meditation then just happens and you don't put effort into it anymore, right? Like so
Mm.
they're like building on this experience in order to like leave it behind and go to the next thing, which I think is what makes this tour really interesting, because I think you see all of those things happening like at the same time. And in between the beginning of the tour and the end, which is only a month or month and 2 weeks or something, like it's pretty different. They're like shedding their skin of the way they approach these songs, like in on a night to night basis.
I love that metaphor, the meditation.
I think
That's
about
what it
it.
feels like.
I think about it similarly. Like I'll make a sports metaphor because why not? Um, you think about like the way that Michael Jordan played basketball in the 1980s. It was very isolation focused. He was just the shocking talent that took over a basketball court, but his teams consistently lost in the playoffs. And it wasn't until he was unlocked using the triangle offense that he stepped back, but his talents were now so much greater, and now he could just win at the highest possible level. And I think about that similarly with where Fish is at this point in time. Like they could make a career out of the shows that they were playing in 1992.
Mhm.
Better gear, but like that is a winning formula. Kind of rinse and repeat. Enough diversity, changing the set list. What more can you ask of a band? How many bands do we listen to that like you literally only need to see one time in a 2 to 5 year stretch because they're going to basically play the same set list? Like a jam adjacent band, I don't want to call them out in a negative way, but like My Morning Jacket kind of figured out what people want out of their set list in like 2007. And that's what a My Morning Jacket show still is in 2024. A Fish show in 2024 is nothing like a Fish show in the early 90s. And a lot of that is because in this tour, I think to your point, RJ, they'd gotten so good at what they were doing that they said, okay, what's next? And that what's next, we start to hear in this tour in a way that is going to affect everything to come.
Well, I think that's what real artists do. Not saying that most bands aren't real artists, but artists that are interested in evolution and longevity and constant creation is
And
look
failure,
and failure and are willing to risk that, right? Because I would say
yeah,
the lure of making money when you're doing art, not that I would know, but I imagine, is that when you find a way to make money doing it, you just want to keep doing that because it makes money. So there's a huge risk on changing it up, but you only do that if you're really driven as an artist. And I think that for most bands, they find a way to make money, and there's a lot of pressure for them to just continue to do that to make money. And Fish has never been like that. And I think this is, that first point when they're like, okay, now we're making real money. Like, I'm sure everybody wanted them to keep doing this. And I'm sure that there were so many pressures on them in the mid 90s to keep doing that. But I think that's such an apt metaphor and so interesting to think about because it is really risky and there's a lot of reasons not to do it when you're an artist. And you think about all of the great artists and they've all taken risks when they were doing something that was working well, willing to try it all and to do something new. And that's what this band is doing here in this month in August. And I don't know, I'm like talking myself into why this belongs in the top 5 for sure.
Well, Megan, maybe there's also an acting metaphor here. But you tell me,
There
'cause
is.
I've never
Yeah, there
acted.
is. There is for sure, because I think there's this thing that happens when you're acting on stage and you do a lot of preparation. Like the best actors are super prepared and they have, not just memorized their lines, but they've thought about all their intention and what they've built their history for their character, and then they've decided what they want in each moment. And they come into each scene with like something they're going for and that they're determined to get from the other person. And then you're supposed to, when you're really prepared and the other people on stage are really prepared, be able to let all of that go and exist in the moment and react to what's happening to you right then. And we used to do activities when I studied the Meisner technique, which are exactly like the Hey Hole kind of jams, in that you do all this background work, which I won't get into because it's really boring. Well, not boring, but it would take too long. And you distract yourself emotionally.
Go on acting corner. Come on. This is not boring at all.
Exactly. Come on. You do all this work and you distract yourself emotionally, and you come in with this big feeling that you've created inside yourself with your imagination, because your imagination is incredibly powerful. And then the other person comes in and you are supposed to you repeat back what the person's saying to you. And it's a way to react to emotion in real time, in a real way. And that's what these guys were doing. And it's so hard to do, and you rarely get there. And when you actually get there, you kind of black out and you don't really know what's happening because you're so present in the moment. And I think that's what you can hear them listening to each other so intensely on this tour in August, especially. Like you can just hear them, like you were saying, Brian, just like responding in the moment and just being completely there with each other. And that is so hard to do night after night after night. It takes a lot of courage.
This is a lot of stage setting. All right, now we are.
Shout out to
Oh my God.
Forbin777, who has been keeping track of every stage that has been set throughout this episode.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan, for that beautiful.
That was
stage.
so good. That was it.
Okay. Do you guys like any jams from this tour?
A
A
lot.
few. I like a few. And they're all stash jams. No, I'm just kidding.
What? I just
A lot
want
of
to go
stash jams.
we're going to talk about August. I think the and just like a side note about how this project goes, at least for me, is that I have 1 week to listen to a tour,
Same.
and then how many hours? I don't know, not that many. So I only listen to a few shows in full, and then I listen to a lot of highlights. But the 722 show was the first time that I heard like them kind of breaking the mold of a jam in the stash, actually. But I feel like I listened to
Told ya.
highlights from the 6 shows before that, and it was sort of like fine, but that was the first kind of sense where I got like, oh, this is kind of like it's starting to break away from the mold a little bit, but it's mostly through the tension release stuff that you were describing earlier, Meg. But that's a really good version. But there's basically one every show. So however many shows there are, that's how many stashes there are.
Exactly.
Do you guys have any July, any like earlier stuff or early to late? Because this is one that's maybe slightly more chronological, and that the July stuff is just very different from the August.
I really liked the Run Like an Antelope from July 18th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too.
You get a heartbreaker jam. You get the band's playing along with fireworks. You get brother tease midway through there. Then it goes back to Antelope. It just kind of speaks to the like early on in the tour, the what we've been talking about here, that they're listening to each other, they're responding to a new idea. And Antelope's kind of like the perfect song for this, because once it goes into the jam, it just builds. And so if you can break apart that build, you build tension and release, and you are able to, in really quick succession, because it's a really fast song, figure out, all right, if Mike plays this and we all go here, how quickly do we get back? And it's kind of also a song that it feels to me like if it breaks down, it's not the end of the world. You just, Fishman hits a snare and you guys are off again. So, you just hear, whether intentionally or not, the band is really pushing themselves in this in a way that just shocked me, because I knew going into this tour, August is where everything's at. But I also, like you, RJ, I wanted to jump around and see, okay, what happened before then that paves the way.
Yeah, it's funny when I look at the jams that I'd written down before 8-2, it's the stash from 710, the Pittsburgh Antelope, the Antelope from 723, and then the Stash from Great Woods. So like it's Antelope and Stash is clearly their places that they feel like, yeah, that they can test out these feelings. And a lot of those are on Live Baits too. Like the Stash from Great Woods is on Live Bait Volume 12, even though they eventually released that. But that Antelope from Pittsburgh is on Live Bait Volume 13. The Stash from 710 is on Live Bait Volume 10. So like those have been released. But those are the songs that they were really kind of leading into. I think you've got an Axla and a My Sweet One that are pretty cool that are on Live Bait from the Charlotte show on 728. But I think that's kind of like all I had until we get to 8-2 in Tampa.
Well, yeah, we got to go there. Can we just talk about the Pittsburgh show quickly, because
Mhm.
it was called at the time the IC Light Amphitheater. This is a 5,000 seat amphitheater named after or sponsored by a local lager called IC Light. It's basically like an Iron City light beer that has to be the smallest kind of like brand to sponsor an amphitheater. Like it's
That's
like
awesome.
a city specific beer. That's like one kind of beer, not like the brewery. It's the beer. I mean, IC Light Amphitheater, I bet was fucking lit up with IC
That's
Light.
amazing.
It's
I
really
have to
great.
say, I went on like a rabbit hole last night. I don't know, it might have been too late. I was like cramming the last bit, and I was just feeling really nostalgic for the Grand Rapids show on this tour. And I saw that they played at Eastbrook Theater, and I looked up where that was. And then I went down this rabbit hole. It was demolished last year, but it was like this like shopping, like strip mall club with like 1,500 people. It used to be a movie theater when it was first made, like one of those single big wide projections. It looks so shady and small, and like I was just laughing thinking about like them just like they were hustling on this tour. Like it was just not glamorous, man. They were like playing almost the same
No.
show like every night, like just giving it, and like, you know, on the tour bus at least, but playing at the IC Light Amphitheater and the Eastbrook Theater and, you know, Kent,
Yeah.
Michigan. Like they're not like they're definitely
Yeah.
like they're working, man.
They were working
Mhm.
band at this point, you know?
Yeah.
They also, well, never mind. I'm not even gonna get into that. I think there's too many jam chart entries for this tour. It's too much. There's
There's a
too
lot.
many stashes with cool tension release. Like I don't know, like they're all great. Some of them are better than others, but like there's like 20, you know?
I think we are
At
going to
least
close
20.
this series with a much tighter and better representative jam chart list for listeners than currently exists. Because it's a little bit, because of the time constraints, we couldn't just keep adding stuff. We all had to kind
Yeah.
of like,
Right.
and to be clear, I could not have done this without the original, but like the best of the
God.
best, like we deserve another one. I think it's also interesting you mentioned like the band's hustling, the band's like, it's crazy because that theater you're talking about in Grand Rapids, they then play a music festival in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Then they play the Marat Theater, which is a theater where classical music was played, plays happen. And then they play the World Music Theater, which is not a theater, that is an amphitheater. That's like 15,000 people in suburban Chicago. And then they play the Macaulay Theater, the American Theater, the Memorial Hall. These are theaters in Louisville, St. Louis, and Kansas City. Then they play Red Rocks for the first time. This is very much, dare I say, while they are recording right now, Phish's current Goose moment, where they are taking these risks of playing these big amphitheaters. Wolf Trap, The Man, I think Classic Amphitheater in Raleigh is here, Waterloo Village, and New World Music Theater, Red Rocks. These are all places that the band is going to play again and repeatedly when they've become more of like a national touring band. Now they're trying to make that. And so they're filling the gap between like, we have to hit this market, but we can't sell this out because we're playing here. So we're just going to play a strip mall old movie theater, or we're going to play a music festival, or we're going to play this theater that fits 950 people in it. And then we're going to play a place where we only sell out the pavilion and scattered people on the lawn. It's just a really interesting place to be as a band, because I got to imagine they're making enough money that they can keep doing this, but they have not reached the point, and you can tell this by the shoes that they continue to wear, and the style of jeans that Trey wears, and the times he recycles that tank top shirt that is just disgusting. Like, this is pre-Fish looking good in
Oh, yeah.
any way. These guys
Fish
are just
fashion.
like road dogs.
We should do a Fish fashion rundown of this. I just want to say quickly, Brian, just to add to that, you kind of spelled this out, and you and Megan both did, but this is their first headlining show at the Man, first headlining show at Jones Beach, first headlining show at Great Woods, and probably a lot of others along the tour. But yeah, but also mixed in with these weird venues where they probably were just like, there's a day between the music festival in, outside Detroit and Toronto, so let's like do a thing. They were at that point where they could do that, like adding a show at the Troubadour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Brian? Talk about Goose.
This is crazy how this is 5 years prior to Brad Sands being so pissed that they did not sell out the arena in Utah that they played Dark Side of the Moon. Like, how much things are going to change over the next 5 years with this band. This is why I go back to, like, I think we got it right putting it here. Without this tour, that's not who this band is. This band doesn't have the chance to play these kind of jokes on their fans.
I'm not going to go that far, but Megan, I want to hear about more jams that you loved.
Do you think they booked MSG at this point in time? 18 months away? Do you think that they had booked that?
No
Do you think that without this tour, they're playing MSG at the end of the year? No, they're not. I'm not going to give you a chance to rebuttal that.
Well, without us, like without me eating those peanuts I just ate, like I wouldn't be talking right now. Like we can go.
Sure,
we can do that for every moment of life. Like without the tour,
that actually makes no sense, RJ.
No,
I'm just saying, without the tour, of course,
sense.
without the tour, this tour wouldn't exist. Without like a lot of stuff happening.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Without this tour, the latter success, I don't think happens as quickly and as like that's the way it goes. You make a choice.
That's a more specific point. All right, I'll take it.
Good.
Guess what I want to talk about? Guess what jam I want to talk about? I want to talk about a stash. I'm not kidding.
Yes.
I want to talk about a stash from August 15th in Louisville, Kentucky, because I love this stash. I listened to a lot of stashes this week, but this one I really love because, I mean, Paige is just unbelievable, but this one is actually it's a little bit softer. It has this like off-kilter melody that repeats in this distorted way, and it eventually becomes melodic. And there's this moment that Trey starts to solo over it with this like beautiful melody that kind of was a little bit of foreshadowing of like what he's going to do later on. Like he's going to find these like beautiful melodic lines to just soar over the band. And it just kind of hit me of like, yeah, Trey, this is the way. Like it was just a really great use of dynamics. They go up and down in volume, tempo. Really great. Apparently this was released on From the Archives at It. It would be really cool if From the Archives were on Live Fish app. Like just saying that would be awesome. That would be awesome. Really helpful for this kind of thing because this is something I really want to hear. I really want to hear archivally released is this stash. But I think it's great and kind of nestled in so many great shows. A lot of officially released shows right around it, but just really great stash.
I really love that stash. It's really great, like for all the reasons you said. And can I just say one thing? The tweezer from that show, which was the second longest tweezer to date by 9 seconds. 9 seconds.
I didn't know that, I don't think. Wow.
Yeah. So you nerds can figure out which one I'm talking about. But it's the tweezer reminded me of like what you would hear in '94. It started getting starts getting pretty strange and that's a great show.
I also love the hood from that show.
Amazing hood. Yeah, the stash is incredible. It's very melodic. It touches on something you said earlier, Meg, just with regards to them jamming within songs rather than jamming without songs, and we're in between songs. I want to jump back in time just a little bit and highlight the August 6th, Yem into Cocaine, into Yem, into Haley's, into Slave to the Traffic Light. This does employ segues, which they did a few times throughout this tour. Yem is just perfectly played so fast. It's insane that they have this song just like queued up the way that they did. Figures out its way into Cocaine in a manner that sounds a lot like what we will hear 10 months later in June. goes back into Yem. Actually, a cool vocal jam that goes directly into Haley's Comet, and Haley's segues into the first Slave to the Traffic Light in like 200 shows at this point in time. I'm going to get you the exact dates here.
It's 241.
242.
Ooh.
Since October 24th,
me.
1991, which is crazy that they played 250 shows between the fall 91 and summer 93.
That is
That's
crazy.
towing as well. That would be, I think, like going back to like the Baker's Dozen at this point in time.
Wow.
But it is crazy because we do think of this era as kind of very foundational, formative. There's not a single slave in 1992, and there's no slaves on the spring 93 tour. And then it comes back here. They'll play it again at Red Rocks. They'll play it. All the fans will chant for it on 12/30/93, another show that absolutely needs to get officially released. And then it'll start to work its way into the rotation to be more of a kind of foundational piece. But like here, you just like, it's an amazing return. It is crazy. Just as another aside, like Yem has been played like 646 songs. Slave was played for the first time 12/1/84, only 286 total performances. Because of that gap, there's so many slaves that we just don't have.
Wow.
It's a weird sentence to say out loud. I hope you all know contextually. Don't chop that, you know. The other one I want to shout out here is this is from an official release show, but the Reba from August 16th is just wild, expansionary, just mesmerizing fish. We're at a point where a song like Reba, which will become more standard by decade's end and kind of fit a specific slot in a show, is now a jam vehicle. And it's kind of wild to consider what could have happened if a song like Reba stayed in the same vein as Bowie and Tweezer and Stash, and what they would become over the next couple of years.
I love that Reba. It's one of like the first early type 2 Rebas too. It's so beautiful. Like so many nice, like gorgeous sections. So pretty. I also, that Slave was on my list too. It's so good from 8/6.
That
It's
was
like tension and release masterpiece.
the Haley's and Slave from that are on Live Bait Volume 8, along with a bunch of other releases only from August. There's a couple July releases from 7/28, but everything else is August. I don't know why. What else? Oh no, there's a couple others. Never mind. There's a couple of Julys, but there's a lot from summer 93. But not
Yeah,
a lot of
there's a lot.
official releases. Not as many as there should be.
No, but they do have good official releases, I think. They've chosen some really good shows.
Well, they need to choose more.
Do better.
It's a well-represented tour officially. I do think
Yeah.
that there are 2 shows specifically, maybe 3. Well, there's one that I have as like a larger box set to be released, but there are 2 shows I think that definitely should get released from this tour. Meg, I don't want to step on your toes here, so just as I'm talking about it, why don't you tell us what one of those shows is?
Well, wait.
Okay,
Will you
we're
wait?
going there.
Will you wait so that I can give some airtime to our sponsors?
I can wait as long as you need.
Okay, that was long enough. Megan, what do you got?
So are we going to live? We're going to, that's where we're going?
No, well, let's talk about shows. Or you can
Okay.
keep talking about jams. You do whatever you want, and
I think we can bounce back and
Oh,
We'll be
forth.
here for you.
Okay, we'll bounce back and forth. Okay, so I'll talk about the show because I really love the show, but Brian had it on his name when we were coming on, and I was like, Brian, that's the show that I want officially released. So he said I could have it, which is really nice.
That's really nice.
And yeah, it was really nice. But
Chivalry
8
still
to-
lives, right?
Wow.
Just don't forget it, guys.
It's really nice. 8/2 from Tampa is just an incredible show, especially the second half of set 1 has some of the best flow of this whole entire tour. This gin I was going to talk about during jams, but we transitioned to a different section, so I'm talking about it now. Again, I
That's not
really
true.
liked.
I think everyone who's listening will know that is not true. It's not what anyone said.
I take full
Carry on.
responsibility for the I was trying to hey-hole you guys. Just follow along.
Here we go. We're
Jeez.
going. We're going. I like the moments in this tour when things slow down a little bit, and this gin just has this like it's slow to begin with. The tempo is really mellow, and it has this gorgeous, like lazy slowdown, and just kind of like relishing in the twisting and the turning that they're doing. And then it builds really quickly, and you can hear them like almost looking at each other and just enjoying it, and just such an unbelievable drop into Makasupa. And it feels like after the song part, they just go right back to that gin jam. It's so like mellow, and they're lightly singing like Policeman and kind of like haunting, and it has this like foreshadowing. It kind of reminded me of like what's going to happen with the sirens and like Velvet Sea that we were talking about last week so much. It just has this like eerie, like really lovely, really pretty vibe. And then my mind actually somehow works there, and then Doglog, and then ends with Lagrange. Another thing Fish could have played Mondegreen Day for. Why don't you just come out and end the set with Lagrange? That's all people would have been talking about, because this is the perfect set closer. It rocks so hard and it peaks so perfectly. It's just, this is just like a magical section of like 5 songs or whatever. It's so good. And the rest of the show is great too. You've got an unbelievable mics. The crowd is in like the palm of their hand. Everybody's screaming. They launch into that like Sparks jam. You've got Fishman, his moment. He sings Bike. And then you have like a killer Antelope to close the set. This show needs to be officially released.
I think I have a new draft for us to do in the coming months. It's going to be a
Ooh.
draft how Fish plays surprise one set shows.
Like picking the best ones.
No, how do we build a set list for this band?
Oh, that's fun. I like that.
So we're gonna have like classics. We're gonna have jam vehicles. We're gonna have songs that sound like my soul. We're gonna have like funny like Fishman songs, and then we're gonna have bust outs, and maybe a couple other sections. And
yeah, I
each
think
of
you
us,
need a ballad section.
a ballad section too. Good call. And we are going to draft.
I thought you said salad, which I was like, I don't know what that means. But that was like my soul. Like you just have to eat it, and like even though it's like
the ceviche
so
section.
boring.
No, but like we're going to draft how does Fish play single set shows, because we got to figure this out, and we're the only ones who can do this. But anyway, yes, Lagrange would have been better at Mondegreen than everything you got outside of that Fuego.
Exactly.
The Fuego, which was the last thing,
The
and they're like everyone leave.
Yeah.
The Ritz Theater in Tampa was opened in 1917, and from 1965 until the late 80s, it only showed adult entertainment until it got purchased and revamped into like a music venue in like the late 80s, early 90s. So it's like some really, really interesting.
That's
interesting
wild.
history.
Some vibes there.
It's still open. It's called the Ritz Ybor now in Ybor City. So it's still around.
I wonder, and I have no way of proving this right now in the moment, but I'd be curious if our intern could be tasked with this. This show features a lot of notable bust outs. Brother, first since July 14th, 92, 144 shows. Doglog, first since May 4th, 91, 284 shows. Lagrange, first since March 17th, 91, 311 shows. Sparks, first since September 13th, 90, 394 shows.
Wow.
I wonder if this is the first bust out show Fish ever played. Because you get a lot of these songs that like were kind of played scattered through the 80s into the early 90s. A song like Brother was debuted in early 92 and then didn't kind of last. I don't know. This would be an interesting thing to figure out, is like, when was the very first show where if you were there, you caught a bunch of bust outs that nobody was expecting to get at that point in time.
And this launches like the best part of the tour. So
right.
Is there an association with like a band that's willing to play bust outs and dig into their catalog, and how that inspires them to go off the deep end more? I don't know.
Trey talks about this show in the Fish book, which at that point was only 4 years in the past for them. And so 93 was still probably ever present.
Crazy.
And he talks about how the band to that point in their career, and I think to a certain extent still has this challenge of showing up when like the pressure's on and playing the best show on the night of the year that you're supposed to, in the venue you're supposed to. That's always kind of like this game that you have to play with Fish, is like, am I going to see them on a night that they just kind of play a Fish show, or am I going to see them on a night that they
Yeah.
play a Fish show?
So
And
true.
he talks about this show that there's like nobody in the audience, and as a result they just threw down. And you get it exactly what you talked about, that Gin Through the Grange to close the set, Mike Sparks, Curtis Lowe,
Love that
midway
song.
through the second set. I mean, just amazing ability to connect with the audience through rarities and through jamming that we all know is going to be a huge kind of directional, next step for this band as they move forward.
The reason this show needs to be released is that the amount of talking during the Curtis Lowe is just disgusting.
Offensive.
Like the 12 people in there are just having a conversation while they're playing Curtis Lowe, and you're like, what is wrong with these people?
Well, that's it.
There's
Also,
no-
like, imagine that. Like, they're hustling so hard, and then people are just talking the whole time. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, it's not easy.
Maybe they don't. I mean, I wonder. There's been no live bait releases from the show. There's been no, I assume a recording exists. I assume a soundboard exists, but we don't know.
This is
don't know for
the
sure.
last Curtis Lowe that is going to be played until the Big Cypress sound check, but then officially until 5/31/2009 Fenway Park, 628 shows.
Wow, that's crazy.
I somehow saw 3 of the first 4 when it was busted out. 5/31/09, 6/12/10, 8/13/10, and have not seen it
Weird.
since. It has not
Yeah.
been played since 12/30/2019, which
when I saw
that
it.
itself was a 121 show gap. So
Hmm.
we are due for a big Curtis Lowe at this point in time.
We are.
Perfect
are.
at MSG. It's a good place to play at.
Nobody talks there.
No.
Nobody talks there.
Not at
Okay.
church.
Can I talk about the 8/12 show, because this
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
this is very important to me, because I'm sure that it's up there. The tape cover is up there on the wall. This is one of the first tapes I ever got, and still
That's
the whole
awesome.
show is like very extremely familiar to me. But the old intro on AC/DC Bag to open the show with like a jazzy outro, and then this Reba that comes in after, and I mean that's just really like stretched and beautiful and great. And there's a tweezer in the show that's into the landlady. I mean, it like this is a really good show. There's some stuff in there that's like, it doesn't flow perfectly, but the set list is really good, except for like the Big Ball Jam, which at that point it's like, I mean, like after Maze it goes Lawn Boy, Big Ball Jam, Golgi, Possum. Like, why bother? Just like go, just play Maze. That's it. Send them off into the night. They did tease Tweezer Reprise in Possum, which I think is just, maybe the whole point. But that's a really cool show, and brings back a lot of memories for me. But that and the Reba, which was released on Live Bait, is really awesome.
Yeah, it's a great Reba, really cool bag. Yeah, this is really good stuff. The landlady tweezer kind of gets back to what we've been saying about, this hey hole jamming, the yes and jamming that we're getting from them at this point in time. That's just huge. Can I talk about 8/9?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you should.
So I have no idea how this show hasn't been released yet. This show fucking rules. This opens with Chalk Dust. Who knows? Chalk
Maybe
Dust.
because it's from Canada.
Potentially, but they released a
Probably.
show from
Yes.
Montreal in 1992.
True. Sorry.
They
Go
also
ahead.
rescheduled a rain out show in Canada. So like they care,
It's true.
They do care.
they care. Split Up in a Melt into Glide. Come on. Tweezer, Yem into Contact, into Crimes of the Mind with the Due to Life on vocals. It's just like, if you're a Fish fan, I think we kind of gave this away when we were starting to talk about this tour. We don't typically go back to check this tour out outside of like, okay, they just released a new show, or okay, like
Mhm.
8/14/93, or okay, the Murat Gin. So if you're one of those fans who like, you kind of overlook this and say, I'll just listen to the Denver Ghost for the 476th time. Point me in the direction of an August 93 show that kind of encapsulates it. Like, I feel like this show never gets so far off the deep end that you're potentially annoyed the way that some people are by how fast and loud and aggressive they are in this tour. But you get all the goodness of this tour. You get quick segues, you get jams off of big songs midway through a set, you get strange moments of flow throughout. It's just, I love it. I think it's a great show. I think it encapsulates everything that we've been talking about here. And I don't understand why this show hasn't been released to the masses, because you just press play. And granted, we're not talking about flow on the level of what we'll get in a couple of years. We're talking pretty good flow for Phish in 1993 in a way that I could just, I could see this making a young fan be like, wow, I have to hang out in this month for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the opening, the chalk dust into Who Knows Chalk Dust, that is
Kind of
sick.
groovy.
Yeah, it's really cool. That's a really cool way to open a show.
I think, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the show because I think it's good, but I think there are
Take stuff away from it. It's okay.
no, I don't. No, like I said, I don't want to, but I want to say that I think there are like 5 shows that should be released. I think there are like so many good shows that are all, because the shows were so high quality. It wasn't like some of the tours that we've talked about where it's like, it's all kind of about 1 or 2 or 3 or a handful of shows. Like they're all these August shows are so good. They're all just really
They're
good.
really good. Yeah, I agree. And they've released, I think, some of the best for sure.
Yeah, so they've released 8/7, 8/13, 8/14, 8/16, 8/17, and 8/26.
I mean, 16,
6 of the
17 are just insane.
Those
So-
are really good.
I just want to just while you're saying that, on the top rated shows on Fishnet, 8/21 and 8/14 are the 2 highest rated that have not been released.
I think 821 is a little overrated. I
8/14
mean-
has been related.
Oh, it has been released.
Yes,
Okay.
and that is, I think,
That was
definitely
Live
good.
Fish 7. Yeah.
And like, obviously, Marat's incredible, one of the best shows, if not the best show of the tour. But I think this 8/21, it's, it has this really cool sit-in with Bella Fleck, and I think that's amazing. But I think
Yeah.
that and I do think it pushes the improv forward for sure. Like, that's a really good sit-in. But I feel like, a sit-in for the entire second set of a tour when they're playing this well is just something I never really want. Like, I'm more
Got
want to hear like what they're gonna do. And I kind of felt like,
What are you saying when they're playing a tour this well and they have a sit-in for the entire second set? Can you expand upon that? Has that ever happened?
Just,
and then they
oh
do
my
it again
God.
the next night. It's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this show, it didn't like lock me in the way that, when I listen to these shows, I listen to like the jam, I look at the jam charts, and then I pull up the top rated shows, and I look at those, and I just expected this one to hit me harder than it did.
I get that. I mean,
I
I
don't
think my biggest takeaway from this show was the stash and the Bowie, Mind Lift Body Bowie, and the fact that Bela Fleck does a really good job of fitting in with a band, and his band does that. Like, just the style of music the Flecktones play works really well with Phish. I
Yeah.
think it's no surprise that some of the best musical sit-ins have been with Phish, but I agree with you. I think that this is so high up because of the sit-in, and I think sometimes that
Yeah.
doesn't tell the whole story.
I mean,
Yeah.
come on. Okay. Here's a question for you, Brian. If we're going to talk about a show that must be released, what about the tour closer?
That's definitely a question I have.
Because you talk about a fucking You Enjoy Myself, Oye Como Va jam. It's just like celebration of the end of the tour at the Greek.
Ugh,
I mean, there's so much else going on there,
that
but that
fluff head is like perfect.
that's a really, really great. I mean, there's so much going on. There's like it's not perfect in terms of the flow, but it's pretty close. And I feel like the way it ends is just awesome, and Amazing Grace acoustic at the very end of the encore. And this is their last show for what, 4 or 5 months, 6
I
months.
think it's like 6 or 7. It's really long.
They'll play a New Year's run.
The New Year's
Year's
run,
run.
but like besides that, they won't
yeah.
go on tour again for
They
a
won't go
long
on tour again
time.
until April. It's
Yeah,
crazy. Like
for a
this is
really long
this.
time.
They're going to be off the road. They're going to make Hoist, which they already know at this point they're putting a ton of time, money, and energy into. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's interesting as well. They played this show at the Greek Theater to close out the tour. They don't play the Greek Theater again until August 5th, 2010.
Wow.
And since then, they've played 6 shows at the Greek Theater. Trey and Mike have done some solo shows here. I think this is a really good show. This again, like, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but man, Stash, Run Like an Antelope, like, you got some big songs that are once again huge. The Yem Oye Como Va, the Fluffhead, as you mentioned, it's just so big and so like in your face. I would have no opposition to this show being officially released. Yeah, I have another show that we should talk about, unless you guys have more to say about the last show of the tour.
No, just that it was on my short list to be released as well. I think it's kind of like encapsulates the whole tour. I think having also like the Dude of Life singing Crimes of the Mind is just, it's just very 1993. I think it's really like perfect.
Yeah.
But what was your other show? Curious.
So I think this show could be released solo. I think it also could be released as a larger box set. And I'm kind of surprised it hasn't been. We talked about this a little bit in our Summer 95 episode. 8/20/93, the first show at Red Rocks. I think it's a really good show. It's very special. You open with Divided Sky, immediately go into Harpua. You've got a really cool It's Ice Wedge combo. Great Antelope to close out set 1. I think that is the best jam of the overall show. But then just reading the set list from second set, 2001, Slave, Melt, Coil, My Friend, Chalk Dust, Yem, Purple Rain, HYHU, Cavern. It's like a greatest hits of Fish in 1993. I do think there's an argument to be made that Red Rocks 93 to 96 should be released as a full box set.
Oh,
There are
that'd be so
some-
sick.
There are some, regular shows in there, but like between 8/20, 6/11, 6/9, I think it is 95, and then that whole 96 run that was just insanity and doesn't have like the greatest jamming, but
No, but
is-
it was special.
it was special, and it ruined their ability to play at Red Rocks until 2009, which then they found Dick's. And but like, it's a special period in the band's history.
Mhm.
This jam bands are big enough. Dave Matthews releases an amazing Red Rock show from 1995. You just see these bands at this stage have grown to the point that they can play this historic venue at a time when a lot of people are starting to move to Denver, Colorado, and Fish is building kind of a cultural epicenter here. Colorado has always been such a huge destination for the band, and you hear them across 4 years play in this venue, and you can just hear the progression and the growth. But I think this is just an amazing show.
That would
But
be sick.
Brian, you didn't specifically mention the best Red Rocks moment of all time. Fish's best Red Rocks moment in the Rift.
In the Rift,
96.
Oh, what
When
happens? I blanked.
in the break. This is Red Rocks.
This is the
This
edge.
is the edge. Best.
I totally forgot
This
about
is
that.
the
Thank you.
edge.
Thank you.
Best.
Oh my God.
But that's a good
I-
point about Colorado.
Yeah,
That's a
I
really
think
good
that
point.
would be sick. I think what's cool about this Red Rock show is it's their debut and they sound ready. Like they sound ready, and reading like the lore of the show, how it was like this huge storm. They didn't know if it was going to happen, and the sky was like all crazy, and they opened with Divided Sky, and then they play Harpua, and it's just like, yes, it's just so good. And then they've got It's Ice and The Wedge, both which are on Live Bait Volume 6, super classic versions of those songs, like so tight, so well played. And yeah, I love the Slave from the show, and the Split Open and Melt's great too. Good, really good show. Highly rated too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's like it was a
Very
highly circulated tape too.
Yeah.
Like really up there,
4.469.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Brian, I I appreciate the parallel between Red Rocks and Dick's. I never really thought about that in terms of like the continuation of the story, but I am also not surprised that you did. So thank you.
I'm here to
I
build
like
a
it.
bridge to any narrative that is necessary.
I also will say that we talked a lot about 826, the Portland show, because that was our 40 for 40 show
Yeah,
for this year. So that's an amazing show, and you can check that out from our
it was
episodes last
released.
year. Hmm?
Was officially released,
Yeah.
but not the next show from 828 for some reason.
No.
Don't know why.
Mm-mm.
And so 724, the Greywood show was released.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably the best
Kind
of the July shows. Do you guys think or no?
And kind of historically, right? Like just released, don't you think, for like the historical purposes? Like it's not
Yeah,
it's not one of the best shows on this tour. It's good, but I don't
I
think
think it's a
like
good representation of that part of the tour with like there's like just good versions of everything, but
Yeah.
it's not the August stuff is there's so much more.
I think it was a sentimental show for them, it seems like.
I kind of got the impression as well that in 2020 and early 2021, as they were playing these dinner movies, they were already putting the work in to master those shows. So why not just release it at that point and make it kind of a jump on a live bait or a live fish subscription, and you'll get to watch dinner movie and then listen to the show immediately after, because you got the Deer Creek release, the Columbus release. Yeah, I think it's a good representation. I think that, as we talked about here, like I think August 2nd has to be released. I don't understand.
That's
like,
my number
that
one
just-
pick.
Come
Mhm.
on.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's
I
totally
want to hear
fine.
that Gin so bad officially released.
Listen, I just want to say this comment from YouTube. It's not too early to start talking about 2028. Brian Brinkman builds bridges 2028. It's a good comment.
I
It's a
would
good
totally
platform.
vote for you, Brian. I would totally vote for
Would
you.
too. I'd like to work with you, like if you could hire me just as your assistant or something.
I will just say I was told by
It's not going to commit.
a middle-aged
Uh-uh.
couple in Istanbul in 2007 that I should run for president, and it's always been there in the back of my head. Anytime I get down, I'm like, those people told me whatever I said, whatever platitudes I threw out, they believed it. So if we can get some money going around this thing, I've heard it's pretty expensive to run for
Yeah.
president, but I will build
Mhm.
whatever bridge you need, because I believe in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That is the right policy for middle America, and I am here to expand that everywhere.
Yeah, people forget we're all from the Midwest.
Yeah,
We have
it's
like
true.
legit Midwest cred.
Brian, I was in Istanbul in 2007 also. Crazy.
When were you there?
That's weird.
Yeah, either July or August. I can't remember.
Okay. I was there in October. Beautiful country. Beautiful country.
Yeah,
I've never been.
Any
I've always
place
wanted
that you
to.
can eat olives for breakfast, I'm here for.
the breakfast
yeah.
is amazing.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
Any other shows that we want to call out?
I feel like we've talked about a lot.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything. There's some stuff from July, but I feel like we can't really go back to July now because I just want to re-emphasize. Maybe I'll just say this as my takeaway. I got the sense around A2 show was really great because of all the reasons you guys said, but I think like that week you start to hear them really veering from the song structure, like in show by show. It's really pretty awesome to hear. I think we've talked about like so many good examples, but if you go through and you look at the jam chart versions, particularly of Stash, Tweezer, Bowie, you can hear them start to like discover that sound that you'll hear at 94, and it really does takes like half the tour to show up. It's pretty cool to hear.
It's an interesting point, and it kind of makes me think about this comment that Evie Dude left earlier in the chat, asking us how we define quote top tours purely on music or overall significance in addition to the music. And I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this, because to me, this tour is our positioning of this tour represents, I think, how we approach this overall task that no one asked us to do. But everyone's here for with bated breath, waiting on numbers 4 through 1. So Meg, what are your thoughts when you think about how to put these tours in some subjective, hopefully one day objective order? What are you thinking about?
Definitely think about significance. I think so much of what makes these tours important is their role in the evolution of the band. Thinking about some of the tours that we put in from 3.0 and 4.0, they were put there because they marked a turning point or a point of evolution. And the more impactful the evolution, the higher the tour went on the chart, I think, for us. And I think this tour is so high because, in my opinion, the impact of the evolution is really strong. And that's kind of my takeaway too, is that I think this is the tour where Type 2 becomes the go-to. And that's going to be Phish's kind of mantra forever. I mean, that's why we're still going to them. So I think this tour specifically, musically, I don't return to it very often at all. It's not like something I want to listen to a lot, but listening to it in the context of this series just showed me how important it is. So I definitely think we think about the significance in terms of evolution and context for the band. What do you guys
RJ,
think?
what say you?
I mean, I think like it definitely is significance, not just music, but it's really hard for me to get to like think about tours that are more significant to what will happen next than others, because the story of Phish to
Get it.
date has been it's what it is. So like I don't know. I think every not that every tour is equally important, but we don't know like I think we've talked about this before. I think even like the bad tours are potentially helping them in different ways, or ways that we don't know, because we don't see the like, whether it's communication off the stage or working through things or writing new material or just personal journey. We have 4 people, not to mention the huge crew, that are all like probably going through a lot of stuff every day on all these tours. So like I guess what I'm saying is you could hear the music evolve, which I think we all agree, like in real time, which is awesome. But I think every tour
Yeah.
is important to what comes next, because that's what ended up happening. So like I have a hard time I have a hard time rating them in terms of which are more important to what happens next, because they're all important for what happens next. And like, the beginning of the Fall 96 tour, which is like kind of like bad, like that, who knows how that, like they were maybe just practicing, Remain in Light the whole time, and that's why like we didn't really get great music. But then you wouldn't get that if you didn't have that. So like but I think that this feels more important because they're bridging the styles all at once. So maybe we're all saying the same thing in different ways.
Well, I like that you're giving away to the audience that we are going to do a top 25 bad Phish tours series next year, which should be a little bit more challenging, but still
Oh my
fun.
God.
Really good. Really
Torture.
good. and fun.
Meg, there are 14 jam charted entries for this tour, equating to 0.75 jams per show. No, I mean I fully on the significance train. It's very easy for me to put over significance on things. RJ knows this from years of talking me down from thinking so significantly about minute things.
Never.
I think you're right. The story is still unfolding. We're not at the point where we're looking back and saying what happened. I think that we do know enough of the story to know kind of where certain things changed. And while that can be reassessed in a variety of ways years later, and clearly we've spent over a decade here hashing out nuances of this band's career. When I think about kind of the succession of these tours, I think about it in terms of what happened here that kind of broke the mold on what came before and led to what came in the year or 2 years afterwards. And in some cases, as we're going to explore in the top 3 tours, what unleashed, and I would say even in this tour, all of what Phish is to come, for the years after. That breaking through whatever they worked through on this tour put them in a position where they suddenly had freedom that they could tap into on stage that they would not have had without this.
And I also think, just adding one more point, is that the top tours make it into this because not only do they have significance and point to evolution, but the music is also good. And I think that's what separates RJ, the tours, from that were important for them in an evolutionary point, that maybe the music wasn't great. it's an evolutionary moment and the music is good. So I think that's kind of the combination that they have to have. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we have 4 left. Yeah,
Wow.
it's interesting because I think that like the 4 we have left are the parts where they land from these evolutionary moments, as opposed to
Yeah.
themselves necessarily being evolutionary moments, even though they all are, obviously. But
I like that.
That is a great, great way to segue into what's coming next.
I
Because,
love that.
yeah, that's.
Nice segue,
Well,
RJ. That was
Thank you.
Can I
beautiful.
can
Thanks,
I just
everybody.
read my sorry? Can I just read my big takeaway from this?
Yeah,
Because I
please.
spent a lot of
Yes.
time crafting this, and I just
Yeah, of
want to put
course.
a bow
Love
on.
your takeaways.
So this is the biggest and the most consequential shift in Fish's career. This is summer '93. While there will be bigger moments to come that truly cement them as one of the best bands of all time, this is when it becomes clear to them all that they can do, taking massive risks, landing the trick, while also pushing themselves further than once thought possible, while also capitalizing on all of the work of the last 4 years, while having the best goddamn time night after night. The addictive pill that is Fish is fully realized.
I like that. The addictive pill.
That's
cool.
You
awesome,
saw
Brian.
Fish on this tour, you're like, I have to fucking see this band tomorrow night. I don't care
Yeah.
if I have to drive
Yeah.
6 hours. I have to see them the next night. I have to see them the next night. And I think that while it was there, wasn't as ever present as it is here.
Well, we have 4 more tours left, and I think all of them represent that feeling. At least the ones I was at, but probably all of them. Hopefully, all of them.
Definitely all the ones I was at too.
Hopefully,
Once
we only
Are
have
we gonna tell
one.
everybody?
next week.
Well, we only have
Yeah.
one. What I'm going to say, because I think it's probably obvious what the top 4 are, but we only have one summer tour left, and that's next week. Brian, what is it?
This is a tour that we got right on with the fans, and I don't know if that means that we got it right or wrong. We're gonna have to hash that out over the next week. It is summer 1998.
Let's go. Summer vibes.
Very summer vibes.
Yeah.
Jukebox time.
Yeah.
We
Let's
got
hear some
covers.
covers.
We got some ambient jamming. We got a
Hell yes.
festival.
Finally, I can read again.
We got humor. We got
Yep.
one of my favorite Fish shows of all time. We got some of my favorite Fish jams of all time. But we also have this big question going into next week, and I'd be curious for the audience to consider this. Did we overrate or properly rate this tour? Curious people's opinions as we come back, because I'm wrestling with it, having just listened through this.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Oh, for
I'd love to.
98 coming up.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Summer 98 includes one show, the only Fish show I've ever been to when I could not procure any weed, no matter what, because everyone
show
already
was
left
that?
for the festival.
Oh
Star
my
Lake.
God, that's so funny.
Star
The
Lake. We couldn't even
90s.
get we couldn't
It
even get like a
happened.
joint. We couldn't even get a joint at Star Lake.
And then they go and open with Bob Marley.
Yep.
Everybody's
exactly.
stone cold
Cruel.
sober in the
Cruel.
audience.
Ridiculous. They probably knew it. They had it all.
Totally.
Megan, is there anything else you want to say about this tour or about our podcast before we wrap it up?
No, I've got to go start listening to Summer 98.
Yeah, me
I
too.
got to start tonight.
Starting right now. Brian listened to it 3 years ago before we planned this project. So. All right.
We all listen to these tours. Some of us plan in advance. All right. Let's just put it out there the way it is.
That's what it is.
Yep.
Just a procrastinator.
Megan and I are just reading too many books. All right.
Exactly.
We're
Just
gonna
busy crushing Brian in our book list. It's
I think
fine.
we're gonna be
You
back
are.
next
You
Monday,
are.
the 11th, the 18th, right?
We'll be back next Monday to do summer 98. And then at some point, do we have our schedule updated for when we're doing our draft?
No.
No, I have to talk to
12-6?
you guys about that,
Yeah.
but we
No,
can talk
we
about
can
it
talk
off. Mhm.
Okay.
We have
But
to
we
sign
may
off
also be streaming and premiering a new podcast in the middle of next week, which is our book podcast. So stay tuned if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
What's our book podcast called, RJ?
Library card.
Do we know what our first book is, RJ?
We do. And you know what? I got a text from a friend who listens, who started reading the book in anticipation of us starting
Stop.
this podcast.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
book,
I love
the Covenant of Water, which is it's going to be a fun discussion.
It is.
It's a wild ride. Appropriate for first.
I need an
discussion.
outline. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, we're gonna have an outline. We're gonna have everything. We're gonna have
working on
everything.
it.
We're gonna have a host. We're gonna have an outline. We're gonna have all of it very soon. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys next Monday for Summer '98. Bye.